freezedryguy.com. That's freezedryguy.com. Or call 866-404-3663. That's 866-404-FOOD.
The Micro Effect. The Micro Effect.
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the story behind the story. I'm your host, Dr. H. Rod. Yes, indeed, the first day of December, the first day of the last month of the year. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully, didn't lose too many people yesterday. I did get emails saying this is tedious, not current information. Yeah, it's okay. Critics are critics. But, again, ladies and gentlemen, facts are facts. Truth is truth. You gotta, please bear with me as you piece this together. This lengthy letter from Benjamin Friedman, a Khazarian Jewish insider, to the real plans on what is being planned and what has been planned. Kind of we'll piece it all together. Believe you me, the truth about Khazars. Now, it's about a Yiddish connection into, again, the Jesuit order of Roman Catholicism. We see that David Goldstein, Dr. David Goldstein, to whom this letter was addressed, had converted to Roman Catholicism from the so-called self-styled Judaism. But what about the origins of the secretive Jesuit soldier orders? I have absolute, conclusive historical proof that the Jesuit order was formed by Spanish Jews, so-called. Again, they are Khazars. The correct definition for them are Khazars, not Jews. That's, again, a modern word. As we discussed and will continue to discuss, the word Jew was never in the original text of Holy Scripture. There was Judeans, but not Jews. We'll talk about the differences. It's a very important difference, okay? But the Jesuit order, folks, was founded and is today controlled by Khazars. You have to understand that. Now, what many people don't realize is the connections of the Jesuits and the Khazars to the events, again, of September 11th. Do you realize, folks, that the Patriot Act, so-called, the Patriot Act was written months before the events of September 11th. It just needed an event to kick it off, where it could go into the halls of Congress and pass without debate. And that's exactly what it did. The architect, the writer of the Patriot Act, was a man by the name of Viet Dinh. Viet Dinh, D-I-N-H. Who was Viet Dinh? Who is Viet Dinh? It's law professor, folks. Law professor at the Jesuit-controlled University of Georgetown. Georgetown University is completely Jesuit. So we see the Patriot Act put together by these Khazars. They hide behind the Christian faith. They say they are Christian Jesuits, but oh my goodness, no. They are bloodline Khazars. They are Yiddish. You've heard probably of Michael Chertoff. Chertoff in the old Romanian Romanov language literally means Chertov, the devil's spawn, or the devil's own seed. Seed of the devil, literally what that means. Look at this guy, and just look at his face and the eyes, and you can tell he's just, creepy to me, doesn't even begin to say. Michael Chertoff began his rule of Homeland Security. Who is, again, Michael Chertoff? Besides being Yiddish, Jewish, he's absolutely connected to the Jesuits. Michael Chertoff's wife just happens to be a professor as well at Georgetown University. See how well connected this all is? If you look at Michael Chertoff's professional history, he once served as a clerk to a man named William J. Brennan. I might ring some bells to you that are in the know. William J. Brennan's a former Supreme Court justice. Again, a Jesuit, Roman Catholic, taught at Georgetown University. Guess who Michael Chertoff was? He was appointed a prosecutor in New York by, Rudy Giuliani, Mr. Crossdresser. Again, Giuliani, Roman Catholic, Knight of Malta. On it goes. Now, the Department of Homeland Security, also known as DHS, there's an incredible number of DHS agents that are Mormon, but the top of the DHS food chain is run by Jesuits, ladies and gentlemen. Jesuits, which are, again, bloodline, Khazar, or it's an order of militancy, again, from the Khazar bloodlines. The real founder, the actual founder of Homeland Security, the first real power behind it was John C. Gannon, Council on Foreign Relations and former CIA officer. Yeah, right. He still is connected to the CIA. He's the head of Department of Homeland Security Intelligence. Look at his history, look at his education. He was trained at the Jesuit Holy Cross College and proudly declares he's a member of the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. He is also a Knight of Malta. Remember Tom Ridge, the first appointee, the first director of the Department of Homeland Security? Tom Ridge, again, Roman Catholic, Jesuit, member of the Knights of Columbus. Okay. We already talked about the second director of Homeland Security, Michael Chertoff. Georgetown connections are incredible. His wife is a professor at Georgetown. Keeps just getting more and more ahas, isn't it? The deputy of the Department of Homeland Security, Michael P. Jackson, the former deputy, also Jesuit trained at Georgetown University and is a Knight of Malta. He also, like Chertoff's wife, Michael P. Jackson, worked as a professor at Georgetown University. The Undersecretary of Department of Homeland Security, the former Director, Undersecretary, Emilio T. Gonzalez, you got it, Knight of Malta, Jesuit. Randy Beardsworth, he's today the Undersecretary, the Administrator for Department of Homeland Security. Yeah, he's at Georgetown University, man. There you go. I mean, it just keeps going amazingly on and on. So, you see, when we talk about facts are facts, when we talk about the connection to the Jesuits with this group of Khazars, you have to understand you really have to see the history unfold. This is why this is so important. This book, The Truth About Khazars, needs to be read and shared and explained to people. It absolutely must be done. Yeah, you're going to get people raising their eyebrows and looking at you like, oh, this is, again, nothing but white supremacists and neo-Nazi Ku Klux Klan stuff. But again, it's because of the incredible billions of dollars spent in propaganda by the Southern Poverty Law Center and B'nai B'rith, Jewish Defense League. They just don't want the truth out there. This is why, as this book unfolds, hopefully, as you read it and hear it on the show with objectivity, without preconceived notions, you will have a number of aha moments. That's the whole plan, folks. Let's go and dig into this where we left off yesterday, okay? Now, we left off yesterday at the problems. You see that this David Goldstein and others would have you believe that Jesus was a Jew. No. Jesus was a Judean. Specifically, he was a Nazarene, a Galilean, a completely different bloodline than the Khazar tribe of Eastern Europe. Okay? Let's start in. As you know, my dear Dr. Goldstein, Benjamin Friedman writes, the Latin word rex means ruler or leader in English. During the lifetime of Jesus in Judea, the Latin word rex meant only that to Judeans familiar with the Latin language, meant only that to Judeans familiar with the Latin language. The Latin word rex is the Latin verb rego, regere, rexi, rectus. In English, it means, as you also will know, to rule or to lead. Latin was, of course, the official language in all the provinces administered by a local administrator of the Roman Empire. This fact accounts for the inscription on the cross in Latin. Ruler of Judea is what it really meant. And now, ladies and gentlemen, just to give you a little bit of background too, the biggest, meanest dinosaur, the carnivore Tyrannosaurus, the tyrant Rex, Tyrannosaurus Rex, to rule the biggest, baddest, meat-eating dinosaur, you see. That's where that Latin name was given. So continuing on with Friedman, quote, with the invasion of the British Isles by the Anglo-Saxons, the English language substituted the Anglo-Saxon word king, for the Latin equivalent rex, used before the Anglo-Saxon invasion. The adoption of king for rex at this late date in the British history did not retroactively alter the meaning of the Latin rex to the Judeans in the time of Jesus. The Latin word rex to them then meant only ruler or leader, as it still means in Latin. The Anglo-Saxon word king was spelled differently when first used, but at all times meant the same as rex in Latin. In essence, leader of a tribe. Okay? During the lifetime of Jesus, it was very apparent to Pontius Pilate that Jesus was the very last person in Judea the Judeans would select as their ruler or their leader. This is why it was mocked so much, okay? Such a mocking thing to put on the cross. In spite of this situation in Judea, Pontius Pilate did not hesitate to order the inscription of the cross, Has Isus Jesus Nazarenus, Jesus of Nazareth, Rex, ruler, Idiorum, which is Judea. Jesus the Nazarene, ruler of Judea, king of Judea. Leader, you say ruler. Quote, by the wildest stretch of the imagination, it is not conceivable that this sarcasm and irony by Pontius Pilate at the time of the crucifixion was not solely mockery of Jesus by Pontius Pilate, and only mockery. After this reference to Jesus the Nazarene, ruler of the Judeans forthwith proceeded to crucify Jesus upon that very cross. In Latin, in the lifetime of Jesus, the name of the political subdivision in the Middle East, known in modern history as Palestine, was Iudaea. Udea. See, the J's were not even there. Judea. It was then administered by Pontius Pilate as administrator for the Roman Empire, of which it was then a part. The English word for the Latin Judea is Judea. English Judean is the adjective for the noun Judea, Judean. You see, the ancient native population of the subdivision in the Middle East known as modern history as Palestine, so the Palestinians at that time was then called Judaeus in Latin and Judean in English. Those words identify the indigenous population of Judea in the lifetime of Jesus. Who can deny that Jesus was a member of the indigenous population of Judea in his lifetime? Of course he was. He was of the melting pot of that time, the multicultural groups called the Judeans. Friedman goes on and said, and of course you know, my dear Dr. Goldstein, in Latin, the genitive plural of Judaeus is Judaeum. The English translation of the genitive plural of Judaeum is of the Judeans. It is utterly impossible to give any other English translation to Judorum than of the Judeans. All qualified and competent theologians and historians regard as incredible any other translation into English of Jesus Nazarenus Rex Judorum than simply Jesus the Nazarene, ruler of the Judeans. That is the pure English translation. You must agree, Friedman writes, that this is literally correct. At the time, Pontius Pilate was ordering the Jesus the Nazarene or inscribed upon the cross. The spiritual leaders of Judea were protesting to Pontius Pilate not to write that Jesus was the ruler of the Judeans, but to inscribe instead that Jesus, quote, had said that he was the ruler of the Judeans. The spiritual leaders, the Pharisees at the time, their leaders made very strong protest to Pontius Pilate against his reference to Jesus as Rex Judorum, insisting that Pontius Pilate was not familiar with or misunderstood the status of Jesus in Judea. These protests are a matter of historical record, as you know. The spiritual leaders in Judea protested in vain with Pontius Pilate. They insisted that Jesus, quote, had said that he was the ruler of the Judeans. and asked Pontius Pilate, quote, not to write that Jesus was the ruler of the Judeans. For after all, Pontius Pilate was a foreigner in Judea who could not understand the local situations as well as the spiritual leaders. The intricate pattern of the domestic, political, social, and economic cross-currents in Judea interested Pontius Pilate very little as Rome's administrator. The Gospel by John was written originally in the Greek language according to the best authorities. In the Greek original text, there is no equivalent for the English that Jesus, quote, had said that he was the ruler of the Judeans. The English translation of the Greek original of the Gospel by John, chapter 19, reads, quote, do not inscribe the monarch, which in the Greek word Basileus, of the Judeans, again, Iudeos, but that he himself said, I am monarch Basileus of the Judeans. Iudea is the Greek for the Latin Iudea and the English Judea. Again, so it's all there. Pontius Pilate then, quote, washed his hands of the protests by the spiritual leaders in Judea who demanded of him that the inscription on the cross authored by Pontius Pilate be corrected in the manner they insisted upon. Pontius Pilate very impatiently replied to their demands with the simple, quote, what I have written, I have written. So the inscription on the cross remained what it had always been, Iosus Nazarenus Rex Iudorum, or in the pure English text, Jesus the Nazarene, ruler of the Judeans. The Latin quotations and words mentioned in this letter are verbatim quotations and the exact words which appear in the 4th century translation of the New Testament into Latin by Saint Jerome. This translation is referred to as the Vulgate edition of the New Testament. It was the first official translation of the New Testament into Latin made by the Christian Church. Since that time, it has remained the official New Testament version used by the Catholic Church. The translation of the Gospel by John into Latin by St. Jerome was made from the Greek language in which the Gospel of John was originally written according to the best authorities on this subject. The English translation of the Gospel by John in chapter 19 from the original text in the Greek language reads as follows, quote, Pilate wrote a sign and fastened it to the cross, and the writing was, Jesus the Nazarene, the monarch of the Judeans. In the original Greek manuscript, there is mention also made of the demands upon Pontius Pilate by the spiritual leaders in Judea. Again, that Pontius Pilate altered the reference on the cross to Jesus. Okay? John establishes beyond any question or doubt that the spiritual leaders in Judea at that time had protested to Pontius Pilate that Jesus was not the ruler of the Judeans, but only had said that he was the ruler. There is no factual foundation in history or theology today for the implications, inference, and innuendos of the Greek word Odeos, the Latin Udeos, or the English Judean, ever possessed a valid religious connotation. That's important, really important. It's talking about a people. In their three respective languages, these three words have only indicated a strictly topographical or geographic connotation. In their most correct sense, these three words in their respective languages were used to identify the members of the indigenous native population of the geographic area known as Judea in the lifetime of Jesus. During the lifetime of Jesus, there was not a form of religious worship practiced in Judea or elsewhere in the known world which bore a name even remotely resembling the name of the political subdivision of the Roman Empire, i.e. Judaism from Judea. It's really important, ladies and gentlemen, to understand no cult or sect or synagogue or whatever existed by such a name. It did not happen. So, listen up. It is an incontestable fact that the word Jew did not come into existence until the year 1775. Prior to 1775, the word Jew did not exist in any language, period. The word Jew was introduced into the English for the first time in the 18th century when Sheridan used it in his play, The Rivals. And the rivals in the scene there, this is how it was used, quote, "She shall have a skin like a mummy and the beard of a Jew." Prior to this use of the word Jew in the English language by Sheridan in 1775, the word Jew was not even a word in the English language. Do you understand that, ladies and gentlemen? It was not even part of the vocabulary. It was a slang term. Shakespeare never saw the word Jew, as you will see. Shakespeare never used the word Jew in any of his works, the common general belief to the contrary notwithstanding. In his Merchant of Venice, verse 361, Shakespeare wrote as follows, quote, "What is the reason? I am a you, I-E-W-E, yo, hath not a you eyes?" In the Latin St. Jerome 4th century Vulgate edition of the New Testament, again, Jesus is referred to by the genitive plural of Judaeus. Okay? Now, from there we'll go on to see where Jesus was referred to as a so-called Jew in further false translations of the Bible in the 18th century and latter part of the 18th century. Oh my goodness, see how it just becomes anemic when you really got to understand the history of the word itself. We'll come right back, ladies and gentlemen. We'll continue with this, and we'll please, I know this is a little tedious. Understand that it's just the connections will be made as we tie it all together. Please stay with us. We'll be right back after these messages. Don't go away. Back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the story behind the story. We're talking about an evolution of a word, and it's incredibly important to see how this has been manipulated throughout history, how the term Judean, which basically was the region of Palestine that encompassed Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Nazareth. All of this became known as the land of Judea. Now, through the multiple translations over the centuries, the word Latin Judaeus began to be shortened, began to be changed. And you follow this from the 4th century all the way to the 18th century. You've got 1,400 years, folks, where the scribes would rewrite and re-edit and basically, again, the words became changed. the meaning of the words became, it's just very subtly so. But again, you got to remember who was in charge really of the translations of this particular text. Look at who formed the Catholic Church. Again, the motives of these individuals in this one area. It's important to understand that you've got the central core figure of Christianity, the life of Jesus of Nazareth, the text, the letters of Paul, the other historical texts show that everything he said he was in fulfillment of Old Testament prophecies. So, see, if you could make this term evolve to a specific false lineage or a false tribe, that has really nothing to do with Palestine. You see, the evolution over centuries becomes very clear. It's just like a hermit crab moving into a new home. You change simple things and it becomes accepted as belief, as truth, but it's not truth. It's absolutely not true. This is what Benjamin Friedman is taking great pains to belabor this point to David Goldstein, because it's critical that Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, was not a Khazar. He was not a so-called Jew. And the very word Jew is not historically accurate to anything as a Hebrew, or Udeus, the incorporated the Hebrews. You've got to understand that. Totally, completely different bloodlines. Totally and completely different. Now, Friedman goes on to explain to Goldstein in this letter that if you look at, again, the 4th century Vulgate text, you see no reference whatsoever to the word Jew, but then in the 18th century editions of the King James Version, you see how it's evolved from Udeus to the English Jew. The English translations successfully changed it from I-U-D-A-E-U-S, Udeus, to U, or G-Y-U, U-E, then went to I-W-E, Yuwa. It's gone through a dozen different word translations, each one systematically eroding to the finally in the 18th century text in 1775, the word Jew is first found. It's amazing to see this. And here's what's the most important part of this. And let me just quote this paragraph. This again from the letter to Benjamin Friedman to David Goldstein. Friedman writes, quote, "With the rapidly expanding use in England in the 18th century, for the first time in history, of the greatly improved printing presses, unlimited quantities of the New Testament were printed and distributed. These revised 18th century editions of the earlier 14th century first translations into the English language were then widely distributed throughout England and the English-speaking world among families who had never possessed a copy of the New Testament in any language. In these 18th century editions with revisions, the word Jew appeared for the first time in any English translations." So this new word Jew, as it was first used in these 18th century Bibles, has since continued in all editions of the New Testament in the English language. This is how the use of the word Jew thus became stabilized and normalized. Now, let me just again paraphrase here this. When the furor over religion occurred in what's called the burnt over district of upstate New York. You had these debates going on constantly. You had theologians and religionists, again, from the Methodists to the Lutherans to the Catholics to all Protestant sects, basically trying to gain converts. And so you had a lot of debate over these original texts. The scholars that knew understood there were passages of Scripture that, again, if you go back to the original Vulgate, had been subtly altered and changed. It didn't really make a lot of difference to the core message, which again is the gospel of grace. The gospel of Jesus Christ and his purity was still intact. That had not been changed, but you're talking about little things like this King of the Jews. No, it's King of Judea, ruler, Rex of Judea. And so you get, in 1820 in upstate New York, you had these people talking about the translations of the Bible, correct? And then you get Joseph Smith coming out with an American Bible, American Holy Writ, called the Book of Mormon, which led, of course, to the foundation of Joseph Smith's article of faith. We believe the Bible to be the Word of God, quote, as far as it is translated correctly, as if Joseph Smith could translate everything absolutely correctly. That's what's amazing to me. Proof now has surfaced that the book of Scripture in Mormonism called the Pearl of Great Price, the books there were absolutely not what Joseph claimed them to be. They have surfaced. They have now been correctly translated 100% correctly, and nothing but mere funeral text. It has nothing to do with the books of Moses and of Abraham. But funny, that doesn't seem to matter to blind Mormons. They just don't want to hear that. They say, well, it's still inspired Scripture. Well, no, it's not. It claimed to be a literal translation of papyrus. So talk about translating things correctly. And so to the Mormon faithful, you see, the Bible is kind of a second place Scripture to the Book of Mormon and the Pearl of Great Price, Doctrine and Covenants, because Joseph Smith was infallibly able to translate correctly. Objectively, that's absolutely bogus. Objectively, the Pearl of Great Price, books of Moses and Abraham, absolutely not translated by any means correctly. Absolutely wrong. Just a little side note. All right, so Friedman continues to Goldstein. As you know, my dear Dr. Goldstein, the best-known 18th century editions of the New Testament in English are the Rhymes edition and the King James Authorized edition. The Rhymes, translation of the New Testament into English, was first printed in 1582, and there the word Jew did not appear in it. The King James Authorized translation of the New Testament into English was begun in 1604, and it first appeared in 1611. So there was a 7-year translation period into English from the Latin and Greek. The word Jew did not appear in it either. Isn't that interesting, ladies and gentlemen? The word Jew was not there in either one of these original texts. However, the word Jew appeared in both these well-known editions in their 18th century revised versions for the first time. The question becomes, who put it there and why? He writes, quote, countless copies of the revised 18th century editions of the Rhymes and the King James translations were distributed into the clergy and the laity throughout the English-speaking world. They did not know the history of the origin of the English word Jew, nor did they even care. They accepted the English word Jew as the only and as the accepted form of the Latin Judaeus and the Greek Judaeos. How could they have been expected to have known otherwise? The answer is they could not and they did not. It was a new English word to them. When you studied Latin in your school days, you were taught that the letter I in Latin was used, when used as the first letter in a word, is pronounced like the letter Y in English, when it is the first letter in the words like yes, youth, and yacht. The I in Judaeus is pronounced like the Y in yes, youth, and yacht in English. And all the 4th century to 18th century forms for the 18th century Jew, the letter I was pronounced like the English Y in yes, young, and yacht. The same is true of the GI or GY in English, where it was used in the place of a letter I. So it was Y or you see. So the present modern-day pronunciation of the word Jew in modern times is a development of recent times. In the English language today, the J in Jew is pronounced just like the J in the English justice, jolly, jump. This is the case only since the 18th century. Prior to the 18th century, the J in Jew was pronounced like the Y in the English word yes, youth, and yacht. Until the 18th century, and perhaps even later than the 18th century, the word Jew in English was pronounced like the English you or hue. And the word Jews like yous or whose. The present pronunciation of Jew in English is a new pronunciation even acquired after the 18th century. Oh my goodness. The English language, as you know, my dear Dr. Goldstein, is largely made up of words adopted from other foreign languages. After their adoption by the English language, foreign words were then adapted by contracting their spelling and corrupting their foreign pronunciation to make them more easily pronounced in English from their English spelling. This process of first adopting foreign words and then adapting them by contracting their spelling and corrupting their pronunciation resulted in such new words in the English language as cab, from the French cabriolet, and many thousands of other words, similarly from their original foreign spelling. Hundreds of others must come to your mind. This, then, by adapting process, the Latin Judaeos and the Greek Judaeos finally emerged in the 18th century as simply Jew in the English language. The English-speaking peoples struggled through 14 centuries, seeking to create for the English language an English equivalent for the Latin Judaeos and the Greek Judaeus, which could be easily pronounced in English from its English spelling. The English Jew word was a resulting 18th century contracted and corrupted, underline corrupted form of the Latin Judaeos and the Greek Judaeos. The English word Jew is easily pronounced in English from its English spelling. The Latin Judaeos and the Greek word cannot be as easily pronounced, so they were forced to coin this word. Now, the problem is, you see, ladies and gentlemen, Jew is not the same as Judea or Judaeos. See how it's been evolved and it's been adopted by, again, Yiddish Khazars. The earliest version of the New Testament in English from the Latin Vulgate edition is the Wycliffe edition published in 1380. In the Wycliffe edition, Jesus is there mentioned as one of the Hueys. Hueys. I-E-W-E-S. Hueys. This was the 14th century English version of the Latin Judeos. Again, pronounced Hueys in the plural and Huey in the singular. Makes you kind of wonder if you're supposed to take the name of God in vain by when you say Huey, maybe that's really the true name of the Judeans. Just a thought. In Anglo-Saxon, Huey or Huey absolutely, again, has connotations of the tribe, the people, and the geographic location of Judea. Then we go into the Tyndale edition in 1525. Again, this was what you see, Hueys, I-E-W-E-S. See how it's just the evolution. It should be, again, the king of the Judeans, but it's over the centuries. And we're talking, again, so much time. Imagine 1,400 years of translation. Again, the key thing here, the translation into English of the Gospel of John, and specifically chapter 19 from the Greek, the original writing reads, "Do not inscribe the monarch of the Judeans, but write instead that he himself said, I am monarch." Again, in the original Greek manuscript, the Greek word basileus appears for the English monarch in the English, and the Greek Judeos appears for Judeans in the English. When you understand this, Friedman writes, there is no reason for any more confusion. My dear Dr. Goldstein, he writes, that the generally accepted understanding today of the English Jew and Judean convey the identical implications, inferences, and innuendos, as they both rightly should. It would make no difference which of these two words was used when referring to Jesus in the New Testament or elsewhere. But the implications, inferences, and innuendos today conveyed by these two words are as different as black is from white. The word Jew today is never regarded as a synonym for Judean, nor is Judean regarded as a synonym for Jew. Again, as I have explained, when the word Jew was first introduced into the English language in the 18th century, its one and only implication, inference, and innuendo was Judean. However, during the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, a well-organized and well-financed international pressure group created a so-called secondary meaning for the word Jew among the English-speaking peoples of the world. This so-called secondary meaning for the word Jew bears no relation whatsoever to the 18th century original connotation of the word Jew. It is a misrepresentation. Now again, look back at the dates and times of this, ladies and gentlemen. The 1775 to 1776, that's just a few short years after the organization and creation of the Khazarian tribe Illuminati formation. Okay? You see we discussed this in past shows. Please understand the connection between the Jesuits, Adam Weishaupt, Nathan Rothschild, Jacob Frank. These are Sabbatean Khazars. Their god is Lucifer, Satan. They have a secret society that involves and rotates around child ritual pedophilia and blood sacrifice. Understand this, ladies and gentlemen. Now, please understand it. It starts to click, I submit, when you see the connections. At the same time, just again the words of Friedman to Goldstein, let me repeat this. Quote, however, during the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, a well-organized and well-financed international pressure group created a so-called secondary meaning for the word Jew. It's not a shortened version of the country of Judea. No, it becomes a religious connotation. They wanted to believe that they, the Khazars, are Jews of the Hebrew translations. Not at all the case. Friedman writes again, quote, the secondary meaning of the word Jew today bears as little relation to its original and correct meaning as the secondary meaning today for the word camel bears to the original and correct meaning of the word camel, or the secondary meaning today for the word ivory bears to the original and correct meaning of the word ivory. The secondary meaning today for the word camel is a cigarette by that name, but its original and correct meaning is a desert animal by that ancient name. The secondary meaning of the word ivory today is a piece of soap, but its original and correct meaning is the tusk of a male elephant. I like that parallel. And again, it's a secondary meaning. Do you understand, ladies and gentlemen, that that's not the original text at all? It's an advertising campaign. Oh, please understand it. It is so very important when you talk about Khazars versus the people of Judea. Gonna take a break. Come back, ladies and gentlemen. We'll piece this all together even more. Again, hopefully more aha moments are in store. Don't go away. We'll be right back. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. Top of the hour, let's do America in Jeopardy, and we'll tie this into Friedman's letter to Goldstein. Here we go. Top of the hour. In a recent development, yet another unknown has come back and filed the first sexual harassment civil suit apart from the criminal investigation on this man. Yeah, of course, that's the answer. The question is, who is Jerry Sandusky, associate football coach at the Penn State University? Yeah, news in the news. I told you this was coming, and yeah, the floodgates are going to open up. Here's another young gentleman. Now he's 29 years old. He's filed a civil lawsuit saying he was sodomized over 100 times. The same modus operandi, the same story as in the grand jury indictment on Sandusky. And this has been going on since who knows when. There's going to be hundreds. It's a case of, folks, serial pedophilia. This guy is a serial pedophile, and there's no doubt in my mind that he was pimping these boys out to high-profile donors to the second mile. But now Louis Freeh will come in and make sure that the trail is obfuscated, the trail runs cold. And who, again, is Larry Freeh, or Louis Freeh? Who are these people that are in charge of Homeland Security and the Federal Bureau of Investigation? Who is Robert Mueller? Who are these people, and why are they so tied to the Jesuit order? And who are the Jesuits? Oh, follow the trail, follow the path, follow the crumbs, and you find out. This is what Friedman was explaining to Goldstein back in 1954. He was saying, look again, knowledge is a collection of facts, he wrote. Wisdom is the use of that knowledge based on facts. Without facts, there is no knowledge. Without knowledge, there is no wisdom. Facts prevent what nothing can cure. You ever get the feeling, ladies and gentlemen, that the situation in Washington, D.C. and this country is uncurable, that nothing can cure it? Well, facts can prevent what nothing can cure. We need to get back to the facts. Facts are man's best defense mechanism, Friedman writes in 1954. Facts are man's best defense mechanism. Without them, men fumble, falter, and fail. Without them, facts, nations decline and fall. There's an interesting story in the Associated Press of all the faux pas, all the facts being done loosely, and all these candidates on both sides. Not only the GOP, but you got Obama's group now. Just the facts don't mean anything to them. I mean, every single candidate has made statements that are just absolutely ludicrous. They don't understand basic American history. They forgot. Oh, they say they're just tired. They're fatigued. Their brain isn't working right. Well, they better then just be quiet. Their brains are fatigued as candidates. What does that mean when they're president? They should know better. They should know when they take office. In the case of Gingrich, the newt, the salamander. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, facts. What's happened to facts? The basic fact is who is behind each one of these puppets. The facts are their Khazars. This is the corrupt influence. This is why you have to understand it. This secondary meaning of words, this pressure group, this lobbying group, this very powerful, well-organized, again, anti-Christian, because they hate the very concept of Jesus of Nazareth. They would like to make you believe complete falsehoods about this, and such is the way they bring confusion to the table, why they have such an incredible... I have an ongoing feud with a well-meaning chaplain in the U.S. military who is as pro-Israel as the day is long, and yet, he's rabidly anti-homosexual. He's very much an activist to rout out perversion like that. And, again, it's not that the people that do it are evil. They're just practicing a practice that's clearly a sin, and there is help for that. There is indeed help. Dr. Scott Lively and others are, Redeeming the Rainbow, the book is incredible, explains how, and case histories of hundreds of gay and lesbians that have been helped. There is a demonic entity involved here, and it goes back to early childhood, folks. Got to understand that part of it. And this is again why pedophilia and ritual pedophilia is so much a part of this cult of the Khazars. Now, we talked about secondary meanings. Let's go back into Friedman's letter. He says, for thousands of years, the word camel meant, camel's a camel, but because of Madison Avenue and Wall Street and Philip Morris and Big Tobacco, camel, through ads in newspapers, magazines, TV, radio, camel becomes a secondary meaning, becomes a cigarette. And same with ivory. Ivory's not a tusk, a product harvested from the tusk of an elephant. It becomes a piece of soap. So he writes, quote, the secondary meanings of words often become the generally accepted meanings of words, formerly having entirely different meanings. This is accomplished by the expenditure of great amounts of money for well-planned publicity. Today, in American cities, if you on the street ask for a camel, someone will hand you a cigarette. Today, if you ask for a piece of ivory, someone will hand you a bar of soap by that name. You will never receive in America a desert animal or a piece of the tusk of a male elephant. This is to illustrate the extent to which these secondary meanings are able to practically eclipse the original and correct meanings of words in the minds of the general public. Get this, folks. The secondary meaning for the word Jew today has practically totally eclipsed the original and correct meaning of the word Jew when it was first introduced as a word in the English language. Again, the quiz for that Judean evolved through 14 different translations to the word Jew or Yua. Totally different meaning. Totally different meaning. It means the people of Judea, not a religious sect, not even a bloodline sect. This phenomena, Friedman writes, is not uncommon. The United States Supreme Court itself has recognized the, quote, secondary meaning of words. The highest court in this land has established as basic law that so-called, quote, secondary meanings can acquire priority rights to the use of any dictionary word. There you have it. So well-planned and well-financed worldwide publicity through every available media by well-organized groups of so-called or self-styled Jews for 3 centuries has created a secondary meaning for the word Jew, which has completely blacked out the original and correct meaning of the word Jew. There can be no doubt about that. There is not a person in the whole English-speaking world today who regards a Jew as a Judean in the literal sense of the word. That was the correct and only meaning in the 18th century. Today, the generally accepted secondary meaning of the word Jew, with practically no exceptions, is made up of 4 almost universally believed false theories. These 4 theories are that a so-called or self-titled Jew is 1, a person who today professes the form of religious worship known as Judaism. 2, a person who claims to belong to a racial group associated with the ancient Semites. 3, a person directly the descendant of an ancient nation which thrived in Palestine in Bible history. And 4, a person blessed by divine intentional design with certain superior cultural characteristics do not denied to other racial, religious, or national groups. All these 4 rolled into one. Isn't that absolutely true? You gotta see how that has been manipulated. When in reality, this is all from a tribe called the Khazars. When you really understand who they are and their Babylonian origins and their rituals and their sacrifices to Moloch and Baal, it starts to suddenly make sense. My goodness, it starts to make sense. Friedman writes, and this is so important, quote, the present generally accepted secondary meaning of the word Jew is fundamentally responsible for the confusion in the minds of Christians regarding elementary tenets of the Christian faith. It is likewise responsible today to a very great extent for the dilution of the devotion of countless Christians for their Christian faith. The implications, inferences, and innuendos of the word Jew today to the preponderant majority of intelligent and informed Christians is contradictory and in complete conflict with incontestable historical fact. Christians who cannot be fooled any longer are suspect of the Christian clergy who continue to repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat ad nauseum their pet theme song, Jesus was a Jew. It actually now approaches a psychosis. Countless Christians know today that they were brainwashed by the Christian clergy on the subject, Jesus was a Jew. The resentment they feel is not yet apparent to the Christian clergy. Christians now are demanding from the Christian clergy the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. It is now time for the Christian clergy to tell Christians what they should have told them long ago. Of all religious groups in the world, Christians appear to be the least informed of any on this subject. Why have their spiritual leaders been reckless with the truth? Countless intelligent and informed Christians no longer accept unchallenged assertions by the Christian clergy that Jesus, in his lifetime, was a member of a group in Judea which practiced a religious form of worship then, which is today called Judaism, or that Jesus, in his lifetime here on earth, was a member of that racial group, which today includes the preponderant majority of all so-called or self-styled Jews in the world, or that the so-called or self-styled Jews throughout the world today are the lineal descendants of the nation of Judea, of which Jesus was a national in his lifetime here on earth, or that the cultural characteristics of so-called or self-styled Jews throughout the world today correspond with the cultural characteristics of Jesus during his lifetime here on earth and his teachings while he was here on earth for a brief stay. Christians will no longer believe that the race, religion, nationality, and culture of Jesus and the race, religion, nationality, and culture of so-called or self-styled Jews today or their ancestors have a common origin or character. The resentment by Christians is more ominous than the Christian clergy suspect. Under existing conditions, the Christian clergy will find that ignorance is not bliss, nor wisdom folly. Christians everywhere today are seeking to learn the authentic relationship between the so-called or self-styled Jews throughout the world today and the Judeans who populated Judea before, during, and after the time of Jesus. Christians now insist that they be told correctly by the Christian clergy about the racial, religious, national, and cultural background of the so-called or self-styled Jews throughout the world today, and the basis for associating these backgrounds with the racial, religious, natural, and cultural background of Jesus of Nazareth in his lifetime in Judea. The intelligent and informed Christians are alerted to the exploded myth that the so-called or self-styled Jews throughout the world today are the direct descendants of the Judeans, among whom Jesus lived during his lifetime here on earth. I want to just break here. I hope that that's still the case today in 2011. These words were written in 1954, almost 6 decades ago. Is it true that Christians, for the most part, understand that? I think it's not true. I think the vast majority of Christians in America today believe this myth. I really do. They believe that Jesus was a Jew and that the Jews are God's chosen people, that they must be given first priority. This is Zionism on steroids. What do you expect from people who can't even pass a social studies quiz? And I'm talking about George W. Bush. This man has no background history of even American civics. How can you expect them to understand the history of these Khazars? And worse, he doesn't want to, because it's all about money and power and millions of dollars. You got people like Hillary Rodham, a Jewish, and Clinton, her philanthropy is, I don't know the best word to describe that bugger, other than he's a bugger. The extramarital affairs and the history of Bill Clinton is just flat out amazing. How anybody could be even considered serious political bait with his history. It just boggles the imagination. Then you have an imposter today who's sitting in the White House that can't even prove he's naturally born citizen. Won't and can't. The root cause of this problem is the Raum Emanuels and the House of Rothschild Khazar agents. And you got to understand that. You have to understand who's behind the scenes here. The people listening to this show I know I'm speaking to the choir for the most part. Many of you understand this. Many might not. I don't know. But I'll continue with Friedman's letter. He writes, Christians today, again this is 1950 and 4, are also becoming more and more alerted day by day why the so-called or self-styled Jews throughout the world for 3 centuries have spent uncounted sums of money to manufacture the fiction that the Judeans, so-called in the time of Jesus, were Jews rather than Judeans, and that Jesus was a Jew. Christians are becoming more and more aware day by day of all the economic and political advantages accruing to the so-called or self-styled Jews as a direct result of their success in making Christians believe that, quote, Jesus was a Jew, in the secondary meaning they have created for the 18th century word Jew itself. The so-called or self-styled Jews throughout the world today represent themselves to Christians as Jews only in the secondary meaning of the word. They seek to thereby prove their kinship, their genealogical kinship with Jesus. They emphasize this fiction to Christians constantly. That fable is fast fading and losing its former grip upon the imaginations of Christians. It might have been so in 1954, but at least the Christians I talk with, boy, oh boy, they believe that. And ladies and gentlemen, no religious group in America has this as more as its forefront than the Mormon Church. Oh yes, you talk about synonymous with Zionism. Mormonism is that in every way, shape, and form. Now you've got 2 Mormons on the campaign trail that are poised to really, take some action here. Does that make you nervous? Boy, it should, because they'll never debate this. It's so taboo. It's so off limits in the last 30 years since George Herbert Walker Bush and his neocon Zionists took over. It's just become more and more the norm. You talk to 100 people in any city in America, and I guarantee you 99% of them will tell you that they believe Jesus was a Jew, that the Jewish leaders today are the descendants of Christ's holy bloodline. It's absolutely true. They believe that falsehood. That is a big, huge lie. That's why I chose to really dissect this book. You got to get it out. This is the story behind the story. And more radio talk show hosts that claim to want to help and rewrite this ship called America, you got to understand how we have been invaded and have lost the Christian tradition. So important, in my opinion. Friedman writes, and against his word he pulls no punches, to allege that, quote, Jesus was a Jew in the sense that during his lifetime, Jesus practiced and professed the form of religious worship known and practiced today under the modern name of Judaism is false and fiction of the most blasphemous nature. If to be a so-called or self-styled Jew then or now, the practice of Judaism was a requirement, then Jesus certainly was not a so-called Jew. Jesus abhorred and denounced the form of religious worship practiced in Judea in his lifetime, which is known and practiced today under its new name, Judaism. That religious belief was then known as Pharisaism. Pharisaism. It's the Nicolaitans, ladies and gentlemen. It's those of Nicholas, of the followers of that would again elevate people above the laity, the Nicolaitans, Nikos, to conquer the lay people. He hated the Nicolaitans. He hated Pharisaism. He hated the worship of Baal, which involved offending little ones, innocent little ones, offended. He said, it's better that a millstone be hung around your neck and you drown in the depths of the sea than to sexually offend one of these little ones. Now, you see, the big lie is they say Jesus was one of us. He was a Jew. Oh my goodness, no. Black is white, white is black. That's what they want you to believe. Tears my heart out to see this, ladies and gentlemen. That's why I have to pound this and pound this and pound this. The Christian clergy, according to Friedman again, learned that in their theological seminary days, but they have never made any attempt to make that clear to Christians. The eminent Rabbi Louis Finkelstein, the head of the Jewish Theological Seminary of America, often referred to as, quote, the Vatican of Judaism, in his foreword to this first edition of his world-famous classic, The Pharisees, the sociological background of the faith, on page 41 states, quote, Judaism, Pharisaism became Talmudism. Talmudism became medieval rabbinism, and medieval rabbinism became modern rabbinism. But throughout these changes in name, the spirit of the ancient Pharisees survives unaltered. From Palestine to Babylonia, from Babylonia to North Africa, Italy, Spain, France, and Germany, from there to Poland, to Russia, and Eastern Europe generally, ancient Pharisaism has wandered, and demonstrates the enduring importance which attaches to Pharisaism as a religious movement. It's like when you say Christ is a Jew or Christ was a Jew, it's in that terminology is saying Christ was a Pharisee. Christ, you see, belonged to this group of religious leadership, the 70 so-called, the Pharisees. Sanhedrin is the 70. That he believed and participated in just the things that he abhorred and railed against. Oh, it's such a tragedy. Friedman continues, the celebrated Rabbi Louis Finkelstein in his great classic, quoted from above, traces the origin of the form of religious worship practiced today under the present name Judaism to its original origin as Pharisaism in Judea in the time of Jesus. Rabbi Louis Finkelstein confirms what the eminent Rabbi Adolf Moses states in his great classic Yahvism and Other Discourses. In collaboration with the celebrated Rabbi H.G. Enlow, published in 1903 by the Louisville section of the Council of Jewish Women, in which Rabbi Adolf Moses, on page 1, states the following. I'll share this with you. Again, this is Louisville section of the Council of Jewish Women, 1903. You'll want to hear this, I promise you. We'll come back, we'll finish up. Thanks for staying with us. I hope you understand the importance and the tie-in to this, to all forms of organized pedophilia and other incredible disasters such as the Federal Reserve Bank. It's all there, ladies and gentlemen. That's the root of the problem. And a problem defined right is a problem half solved. We'll be right back. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the story behind the story. Again, we've come to the point, again, this is the letter from Benjamin Friedman to David Goldstein. Reason, facts are facts. The truth about Khazars. We're to the point now where in 1903, this was written by the Rabbi Adolf Moses in the Louisville newspaper section of the Council of Jewish Women. Quote, among the innumerable misfortunes which have befallen, the most fatal in its consequences is a name, Judaism. Worse still, the Jews themselves, who have gradually come to call their religion Judaism, yet neither in biblical nor post-biblical, neither in Talmudic, nor in much later times is the term Judaism ever heard. The Bible speaks of the religion as Torath Yahweh, instruction, or the moral law revealed by Yahweh and other places as Yirath Yahweh, the fear and reverence of Yahweh. These and other appellations continued for many ages to stand for the religion. Yirath Yahweh, you see. Nowhere was it Judaism. To distinguish it from Christianity and Islam, the Jewish philosophers sometimes designated it as the faith or belief of the Jews. It was Flavius Josephus, writing for the instruction of Greeks and Romans, who coined the term Judaism in order to pit it against Hellenism. By Hellenism was understood the civilization comprising language, poetry, religion, art, science, manners, customs, institutions which had spread from Greece, its original home, over vast regions of Europe, Asia, and Africa. The Christians eagerly seized upon the name. The Jews themselves, who intensely detested the traitor Josephus, refrained from even reading his works. Hence, the term Judaism, coined by Josephus, remained absolutely unknown to them. It was only in comparatively recent times, after the Jews became familiar with modern Christian literature, that they began to name their religion Judaism. Again, it's not even that. There are the Khazars. And what you have to realize, again, is a little add note to this. This was in 1903, 1903. You have the Jewish synagogues throughout all of Europe that consist of bloodlines of the true Hebrew lineage. These are the Sephardic bloodlines. You see the Khazars of the Jesuit order, the false Jews, the Jews who say they are Jews but are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. These are the Jews that began to liquidate the Sephardic bloodlines of Europe during the Holocaust of World War II. That's what you have to understand, that Hitler was a Catholic Khazar. He was Jesuit. He was bloodline Jew out of the house of Rothschild. That's who Adolf Hitler was. That's who his bloodline Nazis, National Zionists were. They were not at all what they appeared to be, Christians. They were crypto-Jews, crypto-Khazars. Now it begins to make sense, you see. Take out these people that have in their prayer books Torah, Yahweh, the moral law, because it has nothing in that. The Torah, Yahweh has no Zionist pressures in the prayer books. That's another addition by Baal, by Moloch, world control and domination. So they have to clean house and get total control as the pure Khazars. And that's why the Sephardi Jews, the bloodline Jews who've embraced Christianity in the Palestinian region, the shores, the Gaza Strip, all these displaced Palestinians are the bloodline, are Sephardi. They are Christian because they understand that Christ was indeed of their bloodline. Now you see, it makes a whole lot of difference, doesn't it? Friedman writes a comment, this statement by the world's two leading authorities on this subject clearly establishes beyond any question or any doubt that so-called Judaism was not the name of any form of religious worship practiced in Judea at the time of Jesus. The Flavius Josephus referred to in the above quotation lived in the 1st century AD. It was he who coined the word Judaism in the 1st century explicitly for the purpose recited clearly above. And what was that again? It was a term he made to distinguish it from Hellenism. That's it. Religious worship known and practiced today under the name Judaism by so-called or self-styled Jews throughout the world was known and practiced in Judea in the time of Jesus under the name Pharisaism, the Pharisees, according to Rabbi Louis Finkelstein, head of the Jewish Theological Seminary of America, and all the other most competent and qualified recognized authorities also concur on the subject. The form of religious worship known as Pharisaism in Judea in the time of Jesus was a religious practice based exclusively based exclusively upon the Talmud. More specifically, the correct name is the Babylonian Talmud, the Talmud of Babylon. The Talmud in the time of Jesus was the Magna Carta, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, all rolled into one of those who practiced Pharisaism. The Talmud today occupies the same relative position with respect to those who profess Judaism. The Talmud today virtually exercises totalitarian dictatorship over the lives of so-called or self-styled Jews, whether they are aware of that fact or not. And their spiritual leaders, so-called, make no attempt to conceal the control they exercise over the lives of so-called or self-styled Jews. They extend their authority far beyond the legitimate limits of spiritual matters. Their authority has no equal outside religion. The role the Talmud plays in so-called Judaism is, as it is practiced today, is officially stated by the eminent Rabbi Morris N. Kurtzer, the director of interreligious activities of the North American Jewish Committee and the president of the Jewish Chaplains Association of the Armed Forces of the United States. In his present capacity as official spokesman for the American Jewish Committee, the self-styled, quote, Vatican of Judaism, Rabbi Morris N. Kurtzer wrote a most revealing and comprehensive article with the title, quote, What is a Jew? Which was published as a featured article in Look magazine, the June 17, 1952 issue. In that article, Rabbi Morris N. Kurtzer evaluated the significance of the Talmud to so-called Judaism today. In that illuminating treatise on that important subject by the most qualified authority at the time, Rabbi Morris Kurtzer stated, quote, the Talmud consists of 63 books of legal, ethical, and historical writings of the ancient rabbis. It was edited 5 centuries after the birth of Jesus. It was edited 5 centuries after the birth of Jesus. It is a compendium of law and lore. An emphasis added here, it is the legal code which forms the basis of the Jewish religious law, and it is the textbook used in the training of rabbis. So Friedman writes, in view of this official evaluation of the importance of the Talmud and the practice of, quote, Judaism today by the highest body of so-called or self-styled Jews, it is very necessary at this time, my dear Dr. Goldstein, to inquire a little further into the subject of the Talmud. In his lifetime, the eminent Michael Rodkinson, the assumed name of a so-called or self-styled Jew, who was one of the world's great authorities on the Talmud, wrote a book called The History of the Talmud. This great classic on the subject was written by Michael Redkinson in collaboration with the celebrated Rabbi Isaac Wise. In his History of the Talmud, Michael Rodkinson on page 70 states, quote, It is the literature that Jesus was familiar with in his early years, yet in existence in the world. Is it possible for us to get at it? Can we ourselves review the ideas, the statements, the modes of reasoning and thinking on moral and religious subjects which were current in Jesus' time, and must have been evolved by him during those 30 silent years when he was pondering his future mission. To such inquiries, the learned class of Jewish rabbis answer by holding up the Talmud. Here, say they, is the source from whence Jesus of Nazareth drew the teachings which enabled him to revolutionize the world. And the question becomes, therefore, an interesting one to every Christian. What then is the Talmud? The Talmud then is the written form of that which in the time of Jesus was called the traditions of the elders, and to which he makes frequent allusions. What sort of book is it? See, again, if you really follow the context of when Jesus spoke of the traditions of the elders, the traditions of the fathers, he always said it was in negative terms. He understood it. And this is exactly what again, the object lesson in Matthew 18. You see, when he held up a little child and said, "This is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven," it was a slap in the face of the Talmud, which teaches that only the Pharisees, the learned of the learned, the pious of the pious, were it was just exactly the opposite of what the Pharisees were teaching, that you had to be so pious and righteous and learn everything. You had to be, the greatest among the rabbis at that time were those that had learned it all, that were so knowledgeable, they were so self-righteous and so pious. He held up this child and said, "Look, this is the greatest. This child, this humble, innocent, naive, yet trusting in faith child is the greatest in the kingdom of my Father." Oh, that probably really upset the Pharisees. Of course it did. What is this man saying, that you should be ignorant, that you should get it? It just flat out flustered him. It had to have. And then he just turned the knife in the back by saying to them, "And he that sexually offends these little ones." See, that's part of Phariseeism, ladies and gentlemen. That's part of the gospel of Moloch, of Baal, of Babylon. You get spiritual enlightenment, according to their teachings, from sexual kundalini relations with young boys and young baby children. I mean, I know that's shocking. I know it's hard to fathom, but it's there. We're going to talk about this tomorrow. We're going to get into this because we're going to talk about what the Talmud says about it. It'll blow your mind. You see, the Goyim, the Gentiles, they're not allowed by law to know these writings of the rabbis, but thanks to Friedman and books like The Truth About the Khazars, you can really understand it. Here's what Friedman writes about this Michael Rodkinson writing. He says, quote, "Stimulated by that invitation, every Christian worthy of the name should immediately take the trouble to seek the answer to that interesting question to every Christian. My dear Dr. Goldstein, your articles do not indicate whether you have taken the time and the trouble to personally investigate, quote, what sort of book the Talmud is either before or after your conversion to Catholicism. Have you ever done so? If you have done so, what is the conclusion you have reached concerning what sort of book the Talmud is? What is your personal, unbiased, and unprejudiced opinion of the Talmud? Is it consistent with your present views as a devout Roman Catholic and a tried and true Christian? Can you spare a few moments to drop me a few lines on your present views? In case you have never had the opportunity to investigate the contents of the, quote, 63 books of the Talmud so well summarized by Rabbi Morris Kurtzer in his illuminating article, What is a Jew?, previously quoted, may I here impose upon your precious time and quote a few passages for you until you find the time to conveniently investigate the Talmud's contents personally. If I can be of any assistance to you in doing so, please do not hesitate to let me know in what manner you can use my help. From the birth of Jesus until this day, there have never been recorded more vicious and vile, libelous blasphemies of Jesus, of Christians, and the Christian faith by anyone, anywhere, or any time than you will find between the covers of the infamous 63 books, which are, again, quote, the legal code which forms the basis of Jewish religious law, as well as the, quote, textbooks used in the training of rabbis. The explicit and implicit irreligious character and implications of the contents of the Talmud will open your eyes as they have never been opened before. The Talmud, you see, reviles Jesus, Christians, and the Christian faith as the priceless spiritual and cultural heritage of Christians has never been reviled before or since the Talmud was completed in the 5th century. You will have to excuse the foul, obscene, indecent, lewd, and vile language you will see here as verbatim quotations from the official unabridged translation of the Talmud into English. Be prepared for a surprise. In the year 1935, again, look at the timing, ladies and gentlemen, the timing, 1935, just as Hitler was coming into power. Just coincidence, I'm sure, right? In the year 1935, the international hierarchy of so-called or self-styled Jews, for the first time in history, published an official unabridged translation of the complete Talmud in the English language with complete footnotes. What possessed them to make this translation into English is one of the unsolved mysteries. It was probably done because so many so-called or self-styled Jews of the younger generation were unable to read the Talmud in the many ancient languages in which original 63 books of the Talmud were first composed by their authors in the many lands between 200 BC and 500 AD. The international hierarchy of so-called or self-styled Jews selected the most learned scholars to make this official translation of the Talmud into English. These famous scholars were also prepared official footnotes explaining passages of the Talmud where they were required. This official unabridged translation of the Talmud into English with the official footnotes was printed in London in 1935 by the Soncino Press, and has always been referred to, therefore, as the Soncino edition of the Talmud. A very limited number of the Soncino edition were printed. They were not made available to any purchaser. The Soncino edition of the Talmud can be found in the Library of Congress in the New York Public Library. A full, complete set of the Soncino edition of the Talmud has been available to me for many years. They have become rare collector's items by now. The Sonsino edition of the Talmud with its footnotes is like a double-edged sword. It teaches the Talmud to countless millions of the younger generations, the so-called or self-styled Jews, who are not able to read the Talmud in the many ancient languages, but it also teaches the Christians what the Talmud has to say about Jesus, about Christians, and the Christian faith. We're going to talk about this tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen. Believe you me, you're going to want to see what it says about, again, what is permissible for the elite to do to young boys. Oh, it's fine to do it before age 9 years and a day. It's told that they should do that. That's part of their culture of training. Now you understand why pedophilia is protected by religious edict, by separation of church and state, why the Mormons tried their best to get this passed as judicial norms. You get the picture, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you do. We gotta go. We gotta run. You be well. Be safe. I'm continuing with Facts or Facts tomorrow, Friday, the 2nd day of December. Be well. Till then, God bless.